Picture this, a world without science as we know it, without the tools of modern technology, yet alive with curiosity. A world where the human mind, armed only with observation and reason, dared to ask the biggest questions of all. What is the universe made of? Why are we here? How should we live? Welcome to an extraordinary journey through philosophy and Stoicism, a story that begins over 2.5 millennia ago and still speaks to us today here in 2025. In this video, we're not just exploring ideas, we're stepping into the minds of four towering figures who shaped the way we think: Thales of Miletus, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. These are the first philosophers of the Western world, the trailblazers who turned wonder into wisdom. And from their legacy, we'll trace a path to Stoicism, a philosophy that's less about abstract debate and more about living well, no matter what life throws at you. Philosophy at its core is the love of wisdom. The word itself comes from the Greek philos, meaning love, and sophia, meaning wisdom. It's a quest that began in the bustling cities and quiet coastlines of ancient Greece, where people first looked beyond myths and gods to seek rational answers. Before them, the world was explained through stories, tales of Zeus hurling thunderbolts or Poseidon stirring the seas. But then came Thales of Miletus, a man from a thriving port city who dared to look at the world differently. He didn't see gods in the rain or the rivers, he saw water as the essence of all things, a single substance tying the universe together. It was a radical idea for the 6th century BC, and it marked the birth of philosophy as we know it, a shift from superstition to reason. From Thales, the torch passed to Socrates, a man who walked the streets of Athens not with grand theories about the cosmos, but with piercing questions about the self. Socrates didn't write books or build systems. He talked to anyone who'd listen, asking, "What is justice? What is goodness? Do you really know what you think you know?" His method was relentless, his curiosity infectious. He believed that an unexamined life wasn't worth living, and he paid the ultimate price for that belief, facing death with a calm that would inspire generations. Socrates didn't just ask questions, he lived them, setting a standard for what it means to seek truth with courage. Then came Plato, Socrates' student, who took those questions and wove them into a vision of reality unlike anything before. For Plato, the world we touch and see, this chair, that tree, is just a shadow of something greater, a perfect realm of ideas. He imagined a philosopher king ruling with wisdom, a society built on justice, and a mind freed from the cave of ignorance. His academy became a beacon of learning, a place where ideas weren't just debated but lived. Plato's dreams were grand, but they planted seeds, seeds that would grow into new ways of thinking about the world and our place in it. And from Plato emerged Aristotle, a man whose feet stayed firmly on the ground. Where Plato looked to the heavens, Aristotle studied the earth, its creatures, its laws, its logic. He cataloged the natural world, invented the rules of reasoning, and wrote about everything from poetry to politics. For Aristotle, the good life wasn't a distant ideal. It was a balance, a golden mean between excess and deficiency. His ideas were practical, his curiosity boundless. Together, these four, Thales, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, didn't just ask questions, they built a foundation, a framework for understanding reality that echoes through the centuries. But this journey doesn't end with them. From their brilliance sprang Stoicism, a philosophy born in the bustling streets of Athens and refined in the marble halls of Rome. Founded by Zeno of Citium around 300 BC, Stoicism took the raw materials of Greek thought and forged them into something new, a way of life. Where Thales sought the substance of the cosmos, Stoics asked how to live in harmony with it. Where Socrates probed the soul, Stoics taught how to strengthen it. Where Plato dreamed of perfection, Stoics accepted imperfection. And where Aristotle sought balance, Stoics found it in virtue alone. Stoicism tells us that the world is unpredictable. Storms will rage, empires will fall, but we can control one thing: ourselves. It's a message that resonated with Roman emperors like Marcus Aurelius, with slaves like Epictetus, and with writers like Seneca, who turned philosophy into a daily practice. Today, in 2025, we live in a world of noise and chaos, a far cry from the olive groves of Greece or the forums of Rome. Yet the questions these philosophers asked and the answers Stoicism offers feel more relevant than ever. How do we find peace in uncertainty? How do we live with purpose when so much is beyond our grasp? Over the next sections, we'll dive deep into the lives and ideas of Thales, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, tracing their influence on Stoicism and uncovering lessons we can carry forward. This isn't just history, it's a guide, a map for navigating life with wisdom and resilience. So join me as we step back to the dawn of thought, where philosophy began and Stoicism took root, and discover how these ancient voices still whisper to us across the ages. Let's step back to the 6th century BC, to a bustling port city on the western coast of what is now Turkey. This is Miletus, a thriving hub of trade and culture in ancient Ionia, where ships from across the Mediterranean docked with goods, stories, and ideas. Amid this vibrant chaos lived a man named Thales. Thales of Miletus, a figure so remarkable that history remembers him as the first philosopher of the Western world. Born around 624 BC, Thales wasn't just a thinker, he was a pioneer, a man who looked at the world with fresh eyes and asked a question no one had dared to ask before. What is everything made of? In an age dominated by myths, tales of gods crafting the earth from chaos or breathing life into clay, Thales offered something revolutionary, a rational answer. That answer was water. Why water? To us, it might seem simple, even obvious, but in Thales' time, it was a bold leap. He lived by the sea, watched rivers carve through the land, and saw rain fall from the sky. Water was everywhere, in the air we breathe, in the plants that grow, in the blood coursing through our veins. For Thales, it wasn't just a substance, it was the essence of life itself, the building block of the universe. He didn't claim water was merely important. He argued it was the arch, the primary substance from which all things arise and to which they return. Imagine the audacity, a single natural element replacing the capricious will of gods like Zeus or Poseidon. This wasn't just a theory, it was a declaration that the world could be understood through observation and reason, not divine whim. But who was this man behind the idea? Thales wasn't some cloistered sage scribbling in isolation. He was a polymath, a merchant, a mathematician, an astronomer, a man of the world. Legends swirl around him, painting a picture of a figure both practical and profound. One story tells of Thales falling into a well while stargazing, so absorbed in the heavens that he missed the earth beneath his feet. A tale that's likely apocryphal but captures his relentless curiosity. Another claims he used his knowledge of weather patterns to predict a bountiful olive harvest, cornering the market on olive presses and proving philosophy could pay. Whether these stories are true or embellished, they show us a man deeply engaged with his surroundings, a thinker who bridged the abstract and the tangible. Thales' genius wasn't limited to cosmology. He was a master of geometry, credited with theorems still taught today, like the one stating that a triangle inscribed in a semicircle has a right angle. He reportedly measured the height of Egypt's pyramids by comparing their shadows to those of smaller objects, a feat that blended mathematics with real-world problem-solving. As an astronomer, he's said to have predicted a solar eclipse in 585 BC, an event that stunned the warring Lydians and Medes into a truce. Whether he truly foresaw it or simply understood celestial patterns better than his peers, this moment cemented his reputation as a man who could read the universe like a book. So why does Thales matter? Why crown him the first philosopher? Before him, explanations of the world were poetic, not systematic. The Greek poet Hesiod, for instance, wrote of earth and sky birthing gods in a cosmic drama. Thales didn't reject these stories outright. He lived in a culture steeped in them, but he offered an alternative. He sought a unifying principle, a single thread running through the tapestry of existence. Water, in his view, was that thread. It wasn't a perfect answer. Later thinkers like Anaximander and Anaximenes, his students, would refine or challenge it, suggesting air or an infinite substance instead. But perfection wasn't the point. Thales' gift was the question itself, the act of looking at nature and asking, what's really going on here? That question sparked a revolution, igniting a chain of inquiry that would stretch across centuries. Now let's connect Thales to Stoicism, the philosophy we're building toward. At first glance, the link might seem tenuous. Thales lived centuries before Zeno of Citium founded Stoicism in Athens around 300 BC. Thales was preoccupied with the cosmos, what it's made of, how it works, while Stoics like Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius focused on the self, how to live well in an unpredictable world. Yet the connection is deeper than it appears. Thales' insistence on reason over myth laid the groundwork for a rational approach to life, an approach the Stoics would embrace wholeheartedly. For the Stoics, the universe wasn't a chaotic playground of gods. It was a rational order, governed by natural laws, what they called the logos. Thales didn't use that term, but his search for a natural explanation of reality echoes the Stoic belief that understanding the world helps us live in harmony with it. Consider this. Stoicism teaches us to accept what we cannot change, the weather, the seasons, the tides of fate, and to focus on what we can control, our thoughts, our actions, our virtues. Thales, in his own way, embodied this. He didn't pray to Poseidon to calm the seas. He studied the water, observed its patterns, and worked with what he saw. His prediction of the eclipse, if true, wasn't about bending nature to his will, but about aligning himself with its rhythms. That's a Stoic principle in embryonic form. Don't fight the universe, understand it. Thales's water wasn't just a physical substance. It was a symbol of adaptability, of flow, qualities the Stoics prized in their pursuit of inner peace. Thales' influence rippled beyond his lifetime. His student Anaximander took the idea of a primary substance and pushed it further, suggesting an boundless apeiron as the source of all things. Anaximenes, in turn, proposed air, arguing it could condense into water or rarefy into fire. These debates, sparked by Thales, show philosophy evolving, questioning, refining. By the time Stoicism emerged, this tradition of rational inquiry had matured. The Stoics didn't care much about what the universe was made of, water, air, or something else, but they inherited Thales' trust in reason as a tool for living. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his Meditations, often reflected on nature's cycles, the rise and fall of empires, the ebb and flow of life, with a calm acceptance rooted in that early Greek curiosity Thales pioneered. Thales wasn't a Stoic in the formal sense, but he planted a seed. His life was a testament to the power of observation, the courage to question, and the humility to seek truth in the natural world. He didn't have all the answers, no one does, but he showed us how to start asking. In a way, he's the quiet ancestor of every philosopher who followed, including the Stoics, who'd later teach us to face life's storms with steady hearts. As we move forward to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, we'll see how this spark from Miletus grew into a flame, illuminating the path to Stoicism and beyond. Thales reminds us that philosophy isn't just about grand ideas, it's about looking at the world, at the water, the stars, the shadows, and daring to wonder. Let's step into the heart of ancient Greece, to Athens in the 5th century BC, a city alive with democracy, art, and ideas. Amid the chatter of the marketplace and the debates of the assembly, one man stood out, not for wealth or power, but for the questions he asked. This was Socrates, born around 469 BC, a figure so pivotal that philosophy itself is often divided into before Socrates and after Socrates. He wasn't a king or a scholar in the traditional sense. He didn't write books or build grand theories. Yet his voice echoes through history louder than most. Socrates was a gadfly, as he called himself, buzzing around Athens, stinging people with questions that forced them to think. What is justice? What is virtue? Do you truly know what you claim to know? His life, his method, and his death would shape the course of Western thought and leave a legacy that Stoicism, centuries later, would embrace. Who was Socrates? Picture a man of modest means with a broad face, a snub nose, and a beard, not a figure of beauty by Greek standards, but one of undeniable presence. He was a stonemason by trade, or so some say, and a veteran of the Peloponnesian War, proving his courage on the battlefield before turning it to the mind. Socrates didn't sit in an ivory tower. He roamed the streets, the marketplaces, the gymnasiums, talking to anyone, artisans, politicians, poets, young men eager to learn. He claimed to know nothing, a famous paradox, I know that I know nothing. Yet this humility wasn't weakness, it was his strength. By admitting ignorance, he opened the door to inquiry, challenging the arrogance of those who thought they had all the answers. At the core of Socrates' philosophy was the Socratic method, a way of seeking truth through dialogue. He'd approach someone, ask a simple question, say, "What is courage?" and then step by step unravel their assumptions. If they said courage is bravery in battle, he'd ask, "What about a mother facing danger for her child? Is that not courage too?" On and on, he'd probe, exposing contradictions until the other person either reached clarity or realized they didn't know as much as they thought. This wasn't about winning arguments, it was about stripping away illusions to find what's real. Socrates believed that knowledge wasn't a gift handed down. It was a fire kindled within, and his questions were the spark. But this relentless questioning didn't win him universal love. Athens, in Socrates' time, was a democracy proud of its freedoms, yet fragile after years of war with Sparta. By 399 BC, Socrates had made enemies, powerful men who saw his challenges as a threat. They accused him of two crimes: corrupting the youth and impiety, or disrespecting the city's gods. The trial was a spectacle held before a jury of 500 citizens. Socrates could have begged for mercy or fled into exile as others had done. Instead, he stood firm. In his defense, recorded by his student Plato in the Apology, he argued that he was no corrupter but a servant of truth, sent by the gods to wake Athens from its slumber. The unexamined life is not worth living, he declared, a line that would outlast the verdict. The jury sentenced him to death. At around 70 years old, Socrates faced his end with a calm that stunned even his accusers. Friends wept, offering to smuggle him out, but he refused. Why? Because fleeing would betray the principles he'd lived by, obedience to the laws he'd spent his life questioning yet respecting. In his final moments, surrounded by disciples like Plato, he drank the hemlock, a poison derived from a plant, and spoke of death not as an end, but as a journey. His last words, according to Plato, were a quiet request: Credo, we owe a cock to Asclepius, pay it and do not neglect it. Asclepius was the god of healing. Perhaps Socrates saw death as a cure for life's burdens. He lay down, the poison took hold, and he slipped away, leaving behind a legacy etched in stone. Why does Socrates matter? Before him, philosophy, as we saw with Thales, was about the cosmos, the stuff of the world. Socrates turned the lens inward to the soul, the self, the ethical life. He didn't care about wealth or fame. He sought arete, excellence or virtue, and believed it came through knowledge. His method wasn't just a trick, it was a revolution. It forced people to reason, to justify their beliefs, to live deliberately. After him, philosophy split into new branches: ethics, metaphysics, logic, but his fingerprints are on them all. He taught us that truth isn't a prize to be claimed. It's a process, a lifelong pursuit. Now let's bridge Socrates to Stoicism. He lived long before Zeno founded the Stoic school in 300 BC, yet his spirit haunts its core. Stoicism, as we'll explore later, is about living virtuously, controlling what you can, your mind, your actions, and accepting what you can't. Socrates was a living blueprint for this. His trial and death are Stoicism in action. He couldn't change the verdict, but he could choose how to face it, with dignity, not despair. When Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations about enduring hardship with a steady soul, you can hear Socrates' echo. When Epictetus, a former slave turned Stoic, said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters," it's as if Socrates nodded from the shadows. Take his death. The Stoics would call it the ultimate test of apatheia, freedom from destructive emotions. Socrates didn't rage or crumble. He reasoned his way to peace. He saw life as a preparation for death, a view the Stoics shared. In his Phaedo, Plato records Socrates musing that a philosopher's life is a rehearsal for dying, letting go of the body to free the soul. Stoics like Seneca admired this detachment, this focus on what's eternal over what's fleeting. Socrates didn't coin Stoic terms, but he lived their ethos: virtue as the highest good, reason as the path to it, and acceptance as the shield against fate. Socrates' influence didn't die with him. His student Plato carried the torch, founding the academy and writing dialogues like the Apology and Credo that immortalized his teacher. Through Plato, Socrates reached Aristotle, then the Hellenistic schools, including the Stoics. His method lives on today, in courtrooms, classrooms, even casual debates, wherever people question rather than accept. He wasn't a Stoic in name, but in spirit he was their kin. The Stoics took his courage, his clarity, and made it practical, turning his gadfly sting into a guide for daily life. Socrates wasn't about answers, he was about the search. He showed us that to live well is to think well, to examine, to challenge, to grow. His death wasn't a defeat, it was a triumph, a proof that principles outweigh survival. As we move to Plato, we'll see how this spark flared into a system, Grek. But for now, Socrates stands as a beacon, a man who faced the world and the end with questions on his lips and peace in his heart. He asks us still, are you living a life worth examining? We're now in Athens, around 427 BC, a city still reeling from war and Socrates' influence. Into this world steps Plato, a young man born into privilege, destined not for philosophy but for politics, until one encounter changed everything. That encounter was with Socrates, the gadfly of Athens, whose questions captivated Plato and set him on a path to become one of history's greatest thinkers. Plato didn't just inherit Socrates' legacy, he transformed it, weaving a vision of reality so bold it still shapes how we see the world. Founder of the Academy, author of dialogues like The Republic, Plato asked not just how to live, but what life and the universe itself truly means. His ideas, grand and otherworldly, laid a foundation that Stoicism, centuries later, would both build on and reshape. Who was Plato? Born Aristocles, Plato was a nickname, possibly from his broad shoulders. He came from an aristocratic family with deep ties to Athens' elite. His early life promised a career in the turbulent politics of a democracy battered by the Peloponnesian War. But meeting Socrates around age 20 shifted his course. When Socrates was executed in 399 BC, Plato, then in his late 20s, was devastated. He fled Athens, traveling to places like Megara, Egypt, and Sicily, soaking up ideas from mathematicians, mystics, and rulers. These journeys didn't just broaden his mind, they fueled a vision that went beyond Socrates' street-level dialogues to something cosmic, eternal, and profound. Plato's genius shines through his writings, over 2 dozen dialogues, most featuring Socrates as the voice of inquiry. Unlike Socrates, who left no texts, Plato was a master of the written word. His dialogues aren't dry lectures, they're dramatic, alive with characters debating life's big questions. Works like Phaedo, Symposium, and The Republic blend storytelling with philosophy, making abstract ideas feel human. But Plato wasn't just a writer, he was a builder. Around 387 BC, he founded the Academy, a school in a grove outside Athens, often called the world's first university. Here, students didn't memorize facts, they wrestled with ideas, mathematics, astronomy, ethics, under Plato's guidance. The Academy lasted nearly a millennium, a testament to his enduring impact. At the heart of Plato's philosophy is a radical idea. The world we see isn't the real world. His allegory of the cave from the Republic paints this vividly. Imagine prisoners chained in a cave since birth, facing a blank wall. They see only shadows cast by objects behind them, lit by a fire they can't turn to see. For them, those shadows are reality. One prisoner breaks free, discovers the fire, then climbs out into the sunlight, dazzled by a world of color and truth. The cave is our senses. The shadows are the fleeting things we touch and see. The sun is the realm of ideas, perfect, eternal forms like beauty, justice, or the good. For Plato, true knowledge isn't about the chair you're sitting on, it's about the idea of chairness that exists beyond it. This theory of forms is Plato's signature. Every object or quality in our world, a table, a kind act, is an imperfect copy of its form, an ideal blueprint in a higher reality. Why does this matter? Because it shifts philosophy from the physical to the metaphysical. Socrates asked what virtue is. Plato asked what virtue itself is, not just how it looks in action, but its essence. To know the forms, we need reason, not senses. A climb from the cave's darkness to the light of understanding. It's a heady idea, almost mystical, but Plato grounded it in practical questions. How should we live? How should society work? In the Republic, he imagined a perfect state ruled by philosopher kings, wise guardians who've seen the forms and govern with justice, not greed. Plato's ideal republic wasn't democracy as Athens knew it. He distrusted the mob's sway, having seen it condemn Socrates. Instead, he proposed a hierarchy. Philosophers at the top, warriors below, and workers at the base, each group doing what it's best suited for, guided by the good. It's a vision both inspiring and controversial, a society of order, not chaos, but one that sacrifices freedom for wisdom. Critics call it rigid, even authoritarian, but Plato saw it as the only way to align human life with eternal truths. His academy trained minds to pursue that alignment, producing thinkers like Aristotle who'd later challenge and refine these ideas. So where does Stoicism fit in? Plato died around 347 BC, long before Zeno founded the Stoic school, but his shadow looms large. Stoicism shares Plato's love of reason, the tool to rise above the cave of emotions and illusions. The Stoics didn't buy into the forms as a separate realm. They were more practical, focused on this world's natural order, the logos. Yet Plato's emphasis on virtue as the highest good, above wealth, pleasure, or power, resonates deeply with Stoic thought. In the Republic, Plato's philosopher king rules with wisdom and justice. For Stoics like Marcus Aurelius, every person can be their own king, ruling their soul with those same virtues. Take the allegory of the cave. For Plato, escaping the cave is about knowing the forms. For Stoics, it's about mastering perception. Epictetus would say the shadows aren't reality, they're just events, and freedom comes from how we interpret them. Plato's focus on the eternal, the good beyond this life, parallels the Stoic calm in facing death. In Phaedo, Plato's Socrates calls philosophy a preparation for dying, a letting go of the body's chains. Seneca echoed this, writing that life's brevity shouldn't scare us if we've lived virtuously. Plato dreamed of a perfect world. Stoics accepted this imperfect one, but both saw reason and virtue as the path to something higher. Plato's influence didn't stop with the Stoics. His academy shaped Aristotle, who'd ground those lofty forms in the earth. Through Aristotle, Plato reached the Hellenistic schools, including Stoicism, blending his idealism with their pragmatism. His dialogues still spark debate about reality, justice, the soul in classrooms and books today. He wasn't a Stoic, but he gave them tools, a belief in reason's power, a vision of virtue's supremacy, a call to rise above the mundane. Where Socrates questioned the self, Plato questioned the cosmos, handing Stoicism a framework to turn inward. Plato wasn't about easy answers. His world of ideas challenged us to look beyond the obvious, to seek what lasts. His life, from Socrates' student to Athens' teacher, was a bridge between questioning and knowing, between the cave and the sun. As we turn to Aristotle, we'll see how this vision met the real world, but Plato's gift remains, a philosophy that dares us to climb, to think, to live as if truth and goodness are worth the journey. He asks us still, are you chained to shadows or reaching for the light? We're now in 384 BC in the small town of Stagira on the edge of the Macedonian frontier. Here, a boy named Aristotle is born, not to aristocracy like Plato, but to a physician serving the local king. This humble start belies the giant he'd become, a thinker whose mind would span the natural world, human behavior, and the very rules of thought itself. Aristotle wasn't content with Plato's lofty ideas. He dug into the dirt, the stars, the here and now. A student at Plato's academy, a tutor to Alexander the Great, and founder of the Lyceum, Aristotle's life was a whirlwind of inquiry. His ideas, from logic to ethics to biology, didn't just shape philosophy. They built a bridge to Stoicism, offering a practical wisdom that echoes through the ages. Who was Aristotle? His father, Nicomachus, was a doctor, and giving him an early taste of observation and science. Orphaned young, Aristotle arrived at Plato's academy at 17, staying for 20 years, a star pupil, though not a yes man. Where Plato soared into the forms, Aristotle questioned their distance from reality. After Plato's death in 347 BC, he left Athens, traveling to Assos and Lesbos, studying marine life and local politics. Then came a call from King Philip II of Macedon, tutor his son Alexander, a future conqueror. For years, Aristotle shaped the boy who'd reshape the world, before returning to Athens in 335 BC to found the Lyceum, a school rivaling the academy, focused on research and reason. Unlike Plato's dialogues, Aristotle's surviving works are dense, lecture-like, treatises on everything from physics to poetry. He didn't charm with stories, he dissected with precision. The Lyceum wasn't a dreamy grove, but a working hub. Students collected specimens, debated theories, walked with Aristotle as he taught, earning the nickname Peripatetics, or those who walk. His output was staggering: physics, metaphysics, on the soul, poetics, and more. Where Plato wrote for the elite, Aristotle cataloged the world for anyone willing to look. His method was empirical: observe, classify, reason, a shift from Plato's idealism to a philosophy rooted in what's real. At the core of Aristotle's thought is a question: why do things exist? His answer? The four causes. Take a table. Its material cause is wood. Its formal cause is the design of tableness. Its efficient cause is the carpenter. Its final cause is its purpose, to hold things. This isn't abstract, it's a framework for understanding change and being. Unlike Plato's eternal forms, Aristotle saw forms in things themselves. The tableness isn't separate, it's in the table. He called this hylomorphism, matter and form united. It's a grounded view, tying philosophy to the stuff we touch and see, a practicality the Stoics would later echo. Aristotle's ethics, laid out in the Nicomachean Ethics, are just as vital. He asked, "What's the good life?" His answer, eudaimonia, flourishing, not just happiness, but a life well lived through virtue. Virtue, for Aristotle, is the golden mean, a balance between extremes. Courage lies between cowardice and recklessness, generosity between stinginess and wastefulness. It's not a rigid rule, but a guide honed by practice and reason. Unlike Plato's philosopher king, Aristotle's good life is for everyone, achievable here, not in some ideal realm. He saw humans as rational animals, driven by purpose, thriving when we align with our nature. Then there's logic, Aristotle's gift to the world. Before him, arguments were persuasive, but messy. He gave us the syllogism, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Simple, yet revolutionary, it's the backbone of reasoning, from law to science. His Organon, a collection of logical works, formalized how we think, proving truth isn't just felt, it's built. This clarity didn't just dazzle philosophers, it armed the Stoics with a tool to dissect emotions and choices, aligning their lives with reason. Aristotle's reach was vast. He classified animals, studied the stars, analyzed tragedy and poetics. Even if his physics was later overturned by Galileo, his method endured. When he died in 322 BC, fleeing Athens amid anti Macedonian unrest, the Lyceum carried on, spreading his ideas. They reached the Hellenistic world, the Romans, the medieval church, the Renaissance, a tidal wave of thought. But how does he connect to Stoicism, born decades after his death? Aristotle died before Zeno founded Stoicism, but his fingerprints are all over it. The Stoics loved virtue, courage, justice, wisdom, temperance as the only true good, a direct echo of Aristotle's eudaimonia. Where Plato sought virtue in the forms, Aristotle found it in action, in balance, a view the Stoics made their own. Marcus Aurelius's calm amid empire's chaos mirrors Aristotle's mean, not too much passion, not too little, just right. Epictetus's focus on controlling what's in our power, our will, aligns with Aristotle's rational animal, choosing wisely within nature's limits. Take the Stoic logos, the rational order of the universe. Aristotle didn't use that term, but his four causes and natural teleology, everything having a purpose, prefigure it. He saw nature as a system, not chaos, a view Stoics embraced to accept fate. His logic sharpened their thinking. Seneca's essays dissect emotions with syllogistic precision, proving vice is irrational, virtue sound. Aristotle's ethics weren't as austere as Stoicism's. He valued friends, wealth in moderation, but both agreed virtue trumps all. Where Plato dreamed of utopia, Aristotle and the Stoics worked with reality, finding peace in what is. Aristotle's legacy didn't fade. Through the Lyceum, his ideas fed the Hellenistic schools, including Stoicism. Medieval thinkers like Aquinas married him to Christianity. Scientists like Darwin built on his observations. Today, his ethics guide debates on character. His logic underpins AI. He wasn't a Stoic, but he gave them a toolbox: reason to tame passion, balance to face life, purpose to endure. Where Plato lifted us to the forms, Aristotle brought us back to earth. A grounding Stoicism turned into a way of life. Aristotle wasn't about escaping reality. He was about mastering it. His life, from Stagira to Athens, from Plato's shadow to his own light, was a quest to understand, to classify, to live well. As we turn to Stoicism itself, we'll see how his practical wisdom fused with Socrates' courage and Plato's vision, crafting a philosophy for the ages. He asks us still, are you living with reason, with purpose, with balance? We've journeyed through the minds of Thales, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, giants who asked what the world is, how we know it, and how we should live in it. Now we arrive at Stoicism, a philosophy born from their legacy, forged in the crucible of ancient Greece and Rome. It's around 300 BC, and Athens is no longer the unchallenged beacon of thought. New powers rise, new schools bloom. In this shifting world, a man named Zeno of Citium steps onto the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch. and begins teaching a way of life that's less about pondering the cosmos and more about mastering the self. Stoicism isn't just theory, it's practice, a guide to face life's storms with calm and courage. From emperors to slaves, it's touched millions, and its roots stretch back to the four philosophers we've met. Who was Zeno? Born around 334 BC in Citium, a Greek Phoenician city on Cyprus, he wasn't an Athenian elite, but a merchant. Legend says a shipwreck changed his life. Losing his cargo, he wandered into Athens, stumbled upon a book about Socrates, and asked, "Where can I find such a man?" The bookseller pointed him to Crates, a Cynic philosopher, and Zeno's path began. He studied with Crates, then others, blending Cynic grit, Socratic questioning, and more into Stoicism. By teaching at the Stoa, he gave the school its name, Murha Stoic, and its mission to live virtuously in harmony with nature no matter what fate brings. What is Stoicism? At its core, it's simple yet profound. Virtue is the only good, vice the only evil. Everything else, wealth, health, even death, is indifferent. The Stoics believe the universe is governed by a rational order, the logos, a natural law we can't escape but can align with. Happiness, or eudaimonia, comes from living according to this order, using reason to master our passions. It's not about suppressing emotions but redirecting them. Fear becomes caution, anger becomes resolve. Zeno taught that we control two things, our thoughts and our actions. The rest, a storm, a tyrant, a plague, is beyond us, so why let it disturb us? This is Stoicism's heart, acceptance of fate, focus on virtue. Stoicism evolved beyond Zeno. Cleanthes and Chrysippus refined it in Athens, but it flourished in Rome through three towering voices. First, Seneca, born around 4 BC, a playwright, senator, and advisor to Nero. His letters to Lucilius are Stoicism distilled. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Exiled, then forced to suicide, he faced death with Socratic calm. Then Epictetus, born a slave around 50 AD, freed to teach in Rome and beyond. His discourses and Enchiridion hammer home a truth. It's not events that upset us, but our judgments about them. Finally, Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor from 161 to 180 AD. His meditations, written amid war and plague, are a private Stoic diary. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. These men lived Stoicism's diversity. Zeno was a founder, Seneca a writer, Epictetus a teacher, Marcus a ruler, yet all preached the same, virtue over circumstance. Seneca faced wealth and power's temptations, Epictetus slavery's chains, Marcus an empire's burdens. Their lives prove Stoicism isn't for the cloistered, it's for the real world, for anyone. It's not cold detachment, but active engagement, doing what's right, accepting what's not. This practicality sets it apart, a thread woven from the four philosophers we've explored. How does Thales connect? His rational gaze at nature, seeing water as the universe's essence, prefigures the Stoic logos. Thales didn't fret over gods. He studied patterns, a Stoic-like acceptance of what is. His curiosity about the cosmos laid a stone for Stoicism's belief that understanding nature brings peace. When Marcus Aurelius marvels at stars or seasons in Meditations, it's Thales' spirit, not his water theory, shining through. Observe, accept, align. Socrates is closer still. His trial and death facing hemlock with dignity are Stoicism incarnate. He lived his maxim, the unexamined life isn't worth living, a call to reason the Stoics echoed. Epictetus quotes him often, seeing Socrates as proof you can control your soul amid chaos. His method, questioning to find truth, sharpens Stoic logic, turning inward to master perception. When Seneca writes of enduring exile, it's Socrates' calm in the cell, reborn. Plato's influence is subtler but deep. His forms, eternal truths beyond this world, don't match Stoicism's earthy focus, yet his love of reason and virtue aligns. The allegory of the cave mirrors Stoic freedom. Escape illusion, see clearly. Plato's good is abstract. Stoics made it practical. Virtue in action, not theory. Marcus Aurelius's reflections on justice echo Plato's philosopher king, but for every man. Stoicism took Plato's climb and grounded it. Aristotle's mark is clearest. His eudaimonia, flourishing through virtue, is Stoicism's goal. The golden mean, balance between extremes, shapes Stoic temperance. His logic, the syllogism, armed Stoics to dissect emotions rationally. If I can't control it, why fear it? Aristotle's natural order foreshadows the logos. His rational animal thrives in Stoic self-mastery. When Epictetus urges focus on what's ours, it's Aristotle's reason applied to life. Stoicism fused these threads into something new. Thales gave it nature's lens, Socrates its courage, Plato its depth, Aristotle its structure. From Athens' Stoa to Rome's palaces, it spread, adapting to Cynic austerity, Epicurean calm, yet staying distinct. It survived Rome's fall, influencing Christianity. Augustine loved Seneca and the Renaissance, inspiring thinkers like Montaigne. Today, in 2025, it's back in books, therapy, even apps, because its truth endures. Life is uncertain, but we can be steady. Why does Stoicism matter now? In a world of noise, pandemics, politics, screens, it offers quiet. Cognitive therapy owes it a debt. Resilience training echoes its drills. Marcus Aurelius's words comfort CEOs and soldiers alike. What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears. It's not about apathy, but action, doing good, staying calm. The four philosophers built the stage. Stoicism performs on it, a philosophy for living, not just thinking. Stoicism isn't an escape, it's a stance. Zeno's shipwreck, Seneca's exile, Epictetus's chains, Marcus's wars, they faced it all, proving virtue holds. It asks us, as Thales, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle did, what's in your power? How will you live? In 2025, amid our storms, it whispers, you can't control the wind, but you can steer the ship. That's Stoicism, wisdom from the past, strength for today.